Hi, everyone. Rich Berliner here with TIWA, the In-Building Wireless Association. And I'm here with an old friend, Brendan Delaney, with a new firm. And I'm really interested to talk with Brendan and discuss what Aetheron Solutions is doing these days and what the future looks like, industry trends. When we arranged for the event that we're doing in Fort Lauderdale on February 10th, Brendan was one of the first people I thought of for a speaking spot. And so he will be with us on a panel at the event. And Brendan, welcome. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me today. Looking forward to taking part in the TIWA event coming up in February and being part of the panel that's headed up by Greg Najjar. So it's going to be a great day with a lot of industry professionals, a couple of really great keynotes that are going to pull together all sides of the industry. So can't wait for that.
Yep. So as I said, Brendan, you are to me one of the most knowledgeable people in the space, and so you've been doing this for quite a while. You and Paul
Mhm.
Fatusha have now formed Aetheron Solutions, and kind of where are you going with the company? What's new and different? What's the unique selling proposition here for Aetheron?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, Rich, been in the industry for quite a long time. I've been doing in-building wireless for the better part of 13 years now, and been in wireless itself for 20, everything from the data center to the tower, and now the in-building piece for this last dozen years. And where Atheron comes into play is really to help navigate the waters for the enterprise, whether it's a building owner, a corporation, healthcare, higher ed. It's a very complicated space, and it's changed a lot over the past 5 years just with the industry trends. It really stemmed, and a lot of the build in the early days, even far before I was involved in building wireless, the carriers fronted a lot of the cost for the systems. They saw it as an imperative to get users on their networks. That has shifted in the past couple of years, really in earnest for the past 5 years, where we've all seen the rollout of 5G. None of us want to pay more for our annual or for our monthly bills. So the carriers are seeing their what they call their average revenue per user stagnate. And at the same time, they have to invest more and more in their networks. The in-building piece is a very high cost for them in terms of deployment and coverage. So that shift is shifting over to the building owners and facility managers to carry the cost and deliver that service. A lot of folks have said it before me. Wireless has become a utility. So it's no different than what we saw from the 90s into the 2000s, where the MCI model was to deploy PBXs and landlines everywhere, wire up every office, every building. That's not the case anymore. Same on the wireless. So we're seeing that shift, and there was the same challenges back then as there are today of this new utility that had to be covered by the building owners.
Right. So interestingly enough, one of the things we didn't do for this upcoming event is we didn't have a huge carrier presence. There are other things going on in the industry where there are big carrier components that come to these events to speak. And I thought it was pretty much, I wouldn't say a waste of time, but it was sort of superfluous for bringing carriers in who, at our last event in Plano, said the following: we're not paying anymore. And so I thought that bringing a whole component of carriers to an event to say we're not paying anymore was kind of, as I said, not necessary, if you will, to clue in the industry
Mhm.
because we already know that. So what's taking the place of that in the new world order, Brendan?
Absolutely, Rich. And the carriers are definitely still part of that conversation. They're just not driving the boat anymore. They do offer some services that are now paid instead of them paying for it. But they've spent billions for the frequencies that we utilize for our mobile devices, 4G, 5G, et cetera. They've spent a lot of money over the years for those frequencies. And for the FCC, that means they own and manage those frequencies for all intents and purposes in our world. So we can't do anything without their approval and buy-in in some way, shape, or form. So that takes industry professionals like myself and the Aetheron team to bridge that gap with the wireless carriers and make sure that the proper solution is being deployed. It's no longer just a distributed antenna system or just a small cell system. There are also locations where booster solutions are deployed for the customers. There are a lot more buildings that may be a fit for a booster type solution than a DAS, but being able to go into a facility, a campus, a customer with multiple locations, and intelligently and educate them as to this is the right solution for here, maybe not there. Getting that to the customer and helping them understand why they're spending their money and for what, and also to what degree they have to engage the carriers, because depending on the arrangement, there are ongoing costs. There's also a lot of business models out there today where you can operationalize those capital costs instead of, $2 to $4 per square foot for your facility. That can get broken out over a 5, 10, 15-year term, depending on the particulars of the situation. So you really need to be creative. And I keep hearkening back to the yesteryear, but it looks a lot like the PBX leasing model of the last transition of utility to end user responsibility.
So let me pull my old guy marketing hat out. So kind of looking at this like right peg, right hole kind of situation, and figuring out what customers need and want, and then giving it to them, sort of the classic definition of marketing. But one of the things that you've done really well in your career is kind of figure that all out. Now, one of the things that's happening at the event is we've got the head of the radio systems for Broward County coming, who's really, really talking heavily about the BDA problems that they're having, because, bad BDA in the network can take the whole radio system for the county down. So they're very, very interested in talking about that. You mentioned BDAs, and that could be a solution for certain things, but that's kind of the important aspect here. Should it be a DAS? Should it be, a Wi-Fi offload system? Should it be a BDA network? Should it be, something as a hybrid? And I think that's what you and Aetheron bring to the table, is that, here's the menu that we have of things that we can provide. So I'm going to do an analysis of what I think you need, and then we're going to discuss that and how much it costs, how we're going to pay for it, how well it all works. And I think that's the important aspect for all of the companies in our space, but especially for yours when you're stepping into a new role with customers like you are.
Absolutely. That discovery process is of utmost importance, from the initial identification of the solution, because out there from a public safety need, you have your public safety BDAs, like the gentleman from Broward County will be speaking about, which are in Florida specifically with their statutory mandate, very important to educate folks on and help them understand. And you have your carrier wireless, so your 4G, 5G on your phone. And then there's also private wireless, Wi-Fi offload. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox from a network perspective of solving problems. And that discovery process is really the first step to understand what the needs are, what the challenges are, give them the right solution. And then also, it's not just providing a solution, throwing it out there and walking away. The project delivery and enablement is very important as well.
No doubt.
So that essentially it's an invisible deployment to them. You want them to barely notice you're there. Of course, there's going to be folks on ladders, pulling cable, installing antennas, but there's ways to do that. And from a project planning and understanding your stakeholders perspective, that delivers it in a way that's as seamless as possible.
But maybe
you have to work around.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, but maybe we glossed over one important part of this, which is that especially in Florida, where we're going to be doing the event, it is mandated that you put in a public safety network, period. And so this is no longer a discussion of, maybe I should do a DAS, or maybe I don't want to. Maybe I'll just let my tenants worry about it. But the landlord must be aware and must address that need for the public safety system in that building. So kind of that's an important aspect to this. They can't just say, well, let the tenant worry about it, because your building must have that public safety system. How do you address that with clients?
So it's a very important point. And from a statutory perspective, it's very important in Florida. But if you look at any major campus environment, healthcare, higher ed, corporate, et cetera, there's usually a two-way radio component to it. And especially as you're looking at different project delivery approaches from a financial perspective, capital expenditure versus operational expenditure, if you can look at a larger program and no different from an outdoor utilities perspective, dig once, you want to look at a facility perspective, you want to open that ceiling once, because every time you have to go back, it's just additional interruption from an operational, from a customer tenant experience perspective. You want to do as much at one time as you can from a feasibility perspective. It's got to be feasible. But if you're going in to deploy an in-building BDA for an ERC system, if it's shown that, the grid test is the first step there. So with any facility north of 13,000 square feet, et cetera, in the state of Florida, you have to demonstrate you have coverage or fix the hole. And starts with that grid test. You can also, at the same time, without a ton more effort, also collect, so you have an intelligent understanding about what the carrier wireless looks like in your facility. So you want to arm your customer with as much data and information as you can, so that they may have some colloquial knowledge of, hey, I drop my calls here, I don't have great service here. Having that data in a report makes it all that more actionable, so that they can build an ROI on it as you're moving from the director to the CIO or the CIO to the CFO to justify these expenses, or from a facilities management and safety perspective. But you really want to look at how you can deploy multiple things at one time to avoid that challenge.
Yeah, the measured twice, cut once. Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Exactly. And there's the controversial take that definitely it's all up to the authority having jurisdiction. But there are many demonstrated experiences where you can co-locate a carrier wireless system and a public safety system. The devil is in the details on that. You have to make sure that it's designed properly, filtered properly, and you're not going to do more harm than good. Like you said, a BDA problem on a public safety system can drop the whole network. Nobody wants to be that person. That's a bad day for everyone involved. But with the proper RF engineering and planning, you can co-locate those with both the carrier and the public safety jurisdiction approval of it. But there's always ways to think about these solutions.
So I love the enlightened approach to this, and that's what, trademark of what you've always been in this business. But talk about trends and what's going on, what you see, and we'll finish up with that. Where do you see this business going? You guys are jumping in now in a great way. You're putting both feet in. And what do you see the trends and changes that are going on right now, and how that affects your business?
Mm-hmm. I think right now it's a lot of education for the end users, facility owners, managers, et cetera, to help them understand what the challenges are of the carriers no longer coming in with money, what their today challenges are from a liability perspective and a responsibility perspective of, hey, if there's an emergency here, can people call 911? You still need that 911 inside in the event there's an emergency. So understanding, it's not just the convenience factor of being able to, call somebody between your meetings. It's beyond that, or scrolling. It really goes down to an experience perspective and a safety perspective. So you need your ubiquitous wireless across the board indoors.
Right. And one of the choices, though, I think that's the important aspect of this, is a guy like you comes in and is able to talk to a building owner, facility manager, whomever, about the choices they have in this situation. 100%. So how does that play? How do you work that? You come in with your toolbox, if you will, in technical sales terms, you come in with your toolbox. How does that work for you in terms of what you offer?
Okay. And that upfront consultation and understanding is step one. And that's where you start dividing up the solution of, okay, is this something where a Wi-Fi offload would work? Is this a facility where you have both the lower capacity as well as the outdoor coverage to do a booster solution? Or do you have to go down the road of a DAS solution or even a private wireless where there's also some ability to do roaming? It's all about looking at the particulars of who are the users, what do they need, what are they using the system for, and how can you best deliver that solution for the customer in a responsible perspective? Like you said before, it's the right peg in the right hole. There's no silver bullet in this industry, and that's really where we felt we needed to differentiate within Aetheron. We're not coming in with a set solution, a set OEM, a set, you know, hammer for a nail. There's all different solutions for all different situations, and helping navigate those waters is really what we bring to the table.
And the beauty of what you're doing is really getting ready for AI in these buildings and making sure that whatever they put in preps them for what they need to do with AI in their space. And no, we're going to be talking about that with our keynote from the Dr. Bacuzzi from NVIDIA.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to be talking about that. You know, who knew that NVIDIA had a 5G, 6G practice inside? We thought they were a chip maker, but there's a stack and there's a 5G communications component to what NVIDIA is doing, which kind of, for a guy like you, is the holy grail, because you must max, you know, the theme of this event, based on what the NVIDIA fellow, Dr. Bacuzzi, is talking about, is robust connectivity is a must to maximize your AI investment. And so, you know, that sets up a company like Aetheron to go in and say, you know, we know you're going to be using AI. We know you have multiple uses for it, and people in the building are going to be doing it. What do you need to do with your connectivity piece to make it happen? How does that play in your mind in the setup for AI?
Absolutely, because each one of these devices that we hold in our hands on a day-to-day basis, as we're upgrading, the processing power is just becoming more. So the hyperscalers are getting a lot of the big buzz and the big press with all the GPUs, which if you're a, you know, IT geek like I tend to be, you see our computer component costs are skyrocketing because everything's getting bought up by the hyperscalers. That's no different than the mainframe business of yesteryear. There's history doesn't repeat itself, but it usually rhymes as time goes on. And we'll see the middle component of compute happening. We see the edge piece, and that's where a lot of the folks in the tower industry are looking to leverage their tower sites. But there's also a large amount of compute, whether it's low latency inference, whether it's industrial AI, and what's going to be coming down the pipeline for just commercial AI uses in a day-to-day business environment, that's going to happen at the edge on our devices. So you really need, if you can't connect to it, that's going to be a challenge. And Wi-Fi does a great job at what Wi-Fi does, but it's not the panacea solution either. And 4G, 5G private wireless isn't. You know, you have to pick your swim lanes for each one of your use cases and technologies. And AI is going to be a big driver of the high security, low latency, very deterministic properties that you get from 5G and then, you know, ultimately 6G. There's a lot to be seen about what 6G brings to the table. But that's going to be the next fun roller coaster that we're on from an industry.
You mentioned an important word, and we're going to finish up with this, the edge. You know, we talked about the edge a number of years ago as, oh, the edge is going to move to every cell site. Well, I think the interesting thing that Joe Bacuzzi from NVIDIA is going to talk about is what is the new edge. And so I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. And I think that's the reason that people should attend this event, to hear what NVIDIA thinks is the new edge and how it plays for everyone in the in-building wireless space. So thank you so much, Brendan, for being with me today. Been with Brendan Delaney from Aetheron Solutions. And that's an important aspect to Aetheron Solutions that we need to remember. But thank you for being with me today. We really appreciate your sponsorship. We'll see you in Fort Lauderdale in just under 3 weeks. And be well and stay warm.
Thanks so much, Rich. See you in a couple of weeks. Have a great day.
Take care. You too.